Well, I'm excited to chat about portfolio careers today. I was just saying, like, I obviously talk mostly about consulting, but I consulting is part of my portfolio, so I'm excited to chat like a bit more specifically about portfolio careers with you.
Yeah, me too. I actually put out a little question box on my Instagram yesterday just to get some questions for today, and
Mhm.
I got some really good responses. Um, and I have like a mix of people, like some who have been in corporate but want to do something a little bit different in their portfolio. So we can also talk about that as well.
Yeah, that sounds great. I also put feelers out for questions and got a couple of them, but I feel like we should start with you since you're sort of the portfolio career expert. And just, I think like, I know that we're very familiar with what that means, but just starting at the highest level of what the heck is a portfolio career?
Yeah, I was actually talking about this yesterday with someone else who's really new to this whole concept of working. And the way I describe it, so I came in contact with this whole concept and way of working back in 2017 because I was very unhappy with my corporate trajectory. And the way I describe it is like a portfolio career is really similar to a financial portfolio, right? And
Mhm.
so in a financial portfolio, you have like some of your blue chip stocks that give you some of your core dividends. Then you have some, really risky stocks that are kind of ad hoc and you're like placing bets and you're thinking, oh God, is this going to actually bring me a return? And then you have some stocks you're just testing. And that's kind of
Yep.
how I think about a portfolio career. So I can give you my example. So I have six income streams, and sometimes people are like, "Oh my gosh, that must just be like a money maker," and I'm like, "Hang on, let's talk about what that actually means."
Yes.
So if I talk about it in the same context of as a financial portfolio, then I have a couple of core income streams that give me my monthly recurring revenue because as someone who lived in corporate for 20 plus years, like that consistency is really important to my nervous system. So, similar to you, I work in the B2B space. So, I have been, my background is building businesses for businesses and supporting companies with workforce strategy. So, I do that in my B2B part. And then I have a direct to consumer business where I mentor women and help them launch their own businesses or launch their portfolio careers. And then I have like
Mhm.
ad hoc things. Like I also have a membership, which is a smaller part of my income. I do strategy days, I do speaking, but those are a little more inconsistent and ad hoc than my two core income streams.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I hear you on, trying to have at least one or two of those income streams being as stable as possible, right? While, like you said, we sort of can test out other things as well to round it out. Yeah, my consulting is definitely still my core income driver and what feels most sustainable and stable to me at this point. I mean, I'm also almost 4 years into that. So, my dabbling in other things has only just started like in the last 8 months or so.
And I think that's a really good message to communicate with people as well. So one of the questions I got yesterday, and I get this all the time, I don't know if you do as well, Paula. Um, it took me years. I'm not going to lie. Like I started building intentionally my portfolio career in 2020. I
Mhm.
was still in an exec role, I worked for in private equity, and I wasn't in a position where I could just quit. Right, school fees, breadwinner, all the things, right? And so I was saying to myself, well, like, I need to replace my income. But when I started down this path, I realized, like, this is not going to be a 3 month process.
Mhm.
It actually took me a solid 4 years to get to a point where my consistency was at a pace where I could then resign the core job.
Right.
I'm not saying that's everyone's story, but I like to share that because I also want to say, like, this is end to end. This has been like a 7, 8 year process for me where I'm really comfortable now. But at the
Mhm.
beginning, like it took longer than I expected to get the whole thing humming.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, similarly with our corporate careers, right? Like you start in this sort of entry level, more junior position, and it takes time to sort of get your sea legs, figure it out. Yeah, and it takes sometimes changing positions or pivoting or doing something different too.
And I always say to people who say like, oh, if I'm on a call with someone and they're like, okay, I want to quit, but I have a 90-day plan and I want to make my income back in 90 days. And I'm just like, okay, we've just got to like reset expectations, because maybe that's true for you if you have a really solid pipeline and network where you know what you're going to market with. But if it took you 20 years to get to your salary that you're at now, it's going to take you a hot minute to rejig how you make money across your portfolio.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely one of those things where it's the journey. The journey is worth it, but it's not a quick instant fix for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, well, one of the questions I got, which is like kind of in the same sphere as that question, is, how much experience do you need to build your portfolio career? And maybe they were talking a little bit more specifically about consulting as a part of that, but the specific question was, because someone who's been a manager or director level only be successful building out a portfolio career? So yeah, I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
yeah, and I generally work with people 7+ years experience, because personally, and usually women who come to me have, they're coming 10, 15, sometimes 20 years experience. And I'm not saying that that is like a hard and fast rule, but what I am saying, my definition of a portfolio career and how I support people is providing your valuable skills that you've accumulated over, 7+ years of work, and then bringing that to a potential organization or to a client or whatever project. And in order to be able to then get quite a good, I would say, day rate or project rate that you're pitching, you have to demonstrate that you have that experience.
Yeah.
And so when I do have, sometimes I have like really younger people in their 20s who have got a couple of years experience come to me and say, I want a portfolio career. And I'm like, that's not a no. You could potentially start with a side project, monetizing a digital product or something like that. But if we're thinking, for me personally, my core income makers are based off, my whole pitch to clients is, you're collapsing 20 years experience of me being in venture building and private equity and startup into a 6-month process where I partner with you to deliver an outcome.
Yes. Yes.
And so that's why I think, at minimum, for me personally, how I look at things, it's like 7 or 8 years, because then we could really start emphasizing value-based pricing versus, swapping time for money. What about
For
you?
sure.
What do you?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you just in terms of, thinking about, we need enough experience to be able to leverage that and apply that somewhere else. And if we're being looked to as someone who can really drive outcomes, we need to have seen the movie before. We need to know the whole plot end to end. Now, does that necessarily mean a certain number of years? Maybe not. I think that your 7+ years is like a really nice number for people to keep in mind. But for me, I also think about it of, so long as you have proof of the outcomes that you can deliver, if you're a little bit more junior than that, that's fine. But also it takes time to build your network. And it's such a relationship based business doing, fractional work, consulting, advisory work, et cetera. So totally agree that, like, maybe if you have fewer years than that, then looking more toward, okay, what are digital products I can do, or like
Yeah.
what's something sort of like tangential to that. Yeah.
And and I guess the only counter to that, what I'm seeing more recently because of AI is, so with my clients, we're working on is like, if you follow me, you know what I believe in the whole CV. So I'm like, how do you create like a career portfolio similar to a creative portfolio? So you can demonstrate case studies and outcomes. And I do think there's this opportunity for people to demonstrate how you could potentially build a AI operating system. I know you're a fractional COO, like you could do something in the back end, demonstrate that via your career portfolio online and potentially get a really great gig. And AI's only been around for a few years, so you can't, no one has 7+ years experience within that. But I think that you could, even if you've been a director for a few years in an organization and then apply that knowledge to something in AI, I think there's a lot of opportunity there at the moment.
Absolutely agree. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, good that I think that we're pretty aligned there. And it was a really good question. And I get that pretty often of like, do I have enough experience to start
Yeah.
consulting? And I'm like, oh, I can't tell that. Like, go try, go start and have the conversations too, you know? Um,
But I bet
but
at the start of your whole journey, and similar to mine, I was in the employee mindset. So it was a very different way. I was even nurturing my pipeline and having conversations with potential clients. And I mean, I had 20 years experience. So you would have thought, oh, people would be like, yeah, you should be a pro at this. And I'm like, actually, the employee context and how you operate internally versus you being a startup of one and how you portray yourself is super different. And
mhm.
so at the beginning, I fumbled like probably all of us, and I didn't price properly. I probably didn't have the right scope.
Mhm.
And as I was more experienced and working in this fashion, I was like,
Yeah.
here's what I'll do again, and here's what I will definitely not do. And that just comes from playing the game, right? Being in it.
Totally. Yeah, totally. Someone just asked us a question, which was, I'm interested in operations, but biz ops isn't talked about. So how I'm sort of interpreting that question is like, what exactly is business operations? And I can just share, given that that's what
Yeah,
I
please
do
do.
primarily as my consulting, is this is my perspective on it, is like there's this giant umbrella of operations at certain organizations, like technology and IT and all of that fall under that umbrella. That's quite common. When I think about business operations, though, it is any system or process that is supporting the business itself. So it's the sort of like back end infrastructure. And oftentimes in larger organizations, and I'm wondering, Jules, if you find this to be the case too, is that there's oftentimes biz ops teams for different functions. So at companies I've been at, there's like a biz ops for sales and biz ops for customer success, et cetera, et cetera. Now,
Yeah.
when I'm a consultant, I'm not typically working with organizations quite at that scale. I tend to like to work with like small, medium-sized businesses. So they don't have that, but they have me coming in and saying, let me look at the whole pie here and all of these different functions and see, okay, this team's using this tool, this team's using this tool. How do they impact one another? Can we actually drop this tool and use this one across the org, et cetera? So hopefully that's helpful for the person who asked the question.
Yeah, and I guess can I ask a follow-up question actually? Because I
Yeah.
love I'm more in front of house, I call it, like a more front end role, venture building.
Yep.
And I have BizOps experts that work with me. I love you guys because it's just not my skill set. And I'm interested to know like how much of what you're doing now with like small to medium companies is
Mhm.
changing because of AI. Like, are you introducing a lot of that thinking?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I'm noticing, obviously we have all of the individual employees who are no doubt using AI in some form on their own. Whether the company is saying, yes, it has our stamp of approval, here's like an enterprise level license to ChatGPT or Claude, your
Yeah.
employees are probably using it. So I'm talking a lot with companies about sort of governance and AI policies, and should we get this team enterprise level version of the tool in house just so that they can protect their own company data? But when we start talking about, should we build agentic things and this tool and that tool, it quickly gets to this point of overwhelm, and then it's sort of like, okay, what's the MVP for now? Like, where can we start that helps with what we have? As like, let's tap into the AI that already exists in our current tool set.
Yeah, very
Um,
cool. Very
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, we got another couple questions here. What approach would you recommend for someone with talent management consulting experience?
Yeah. I can have a
Yeah,
stab and then you can have a stab if you want.
please.
So, oh, I love anyone with talent management experience because I think that you've got such an incredible opportunity in this new future of work. So I write a lot about like the future of work and how I see teams forming. And so, first of all, what I would say is like from a talent management point of view and understanding what your skills and capabilities are, is like who do you actually want to support and work with? I call it your ICP, which is basically your ideal client profile. So really deeply understanding who you want to work with, what problems they have, and how you can solve them for them in a distinct way. So, as an example for talent management, in with AI and people really having these conversations, like what do I do with my workforce? I mean, it could be really interesting for you to think about, well, how might you support organizations to think more broadly about talent and the flexible workforce, like we're talking about now? We're portfolio careerists. We know that organizations are moving from having a lot of FTEs or full-time equivalents in-house to working more with a flexible or workforce like we are. How would that impact them, and how can you develop a potential product or service offering around that? And the last thing I would say is, like, I would be having a load of conversations. I call them curiosity chats. So once I understand who my ideal client profile is and I have a version 1 of a service offering, I then go out and have a bunch of conversations just to ratify that that is something they need and I'm hitting the pain points. And as a result of that, a lot of the times I then finesse my product offering depending on what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
I hope
yeah,
that helps.
absolutely.
What about you, Paula?
Yeah, I chat with a lot of folks who are sort of in that talent, HR people, et cetera, sphere, and a lot of what I'm seeing is obviously know that corporate needs culture help and figuring out how do we make this feel better, more comfortable for people. So I'm noticing a lot of people go in and offering that sort of like culture and wellness approach. I also have talked to a lot of people who are going in and helping companies audit their employee onboarding processes because not only are there layoffs, there's also like attrition happening where people are voluntarily leaving and things because they're feeling like it's toxic. And so folks are going in and doing these audits and making these recommendations and helping implement against those.
Yeah, love that. Here in Australia, so that's where I'm based. Based in Melbourne, Australia. Our landscape at the moment, what I'm hearing from like HR and talent professionals, and I'm not sure if it's the same globally, is that I always encourage people to talk to payers, so who can actually pay your bills. And what we're hearing is if we know that they need a culture solution, but we go in with, like you said, a diagnostic and audit because they'll pay for that. And then the next steps are, and this is what you can do. Because
Yes.
I don't know about you all, but I'm not like in Australia at the moment, people are not seeing success by going in with a culture program. But if they're going in with a diagnostic, like you said, which is great, then it usually follows on to more work, which is great for portfolio careerists in general of how you structure your work.
Yeah, yeah. And the person who asked that question says, great, thank you. They worked in Big Four and big tech. Curious how you would apply talent management more broadly, like as a portfolio. So
So
other
in terms,
ideas, I think, instead of consulting, like what else could this person do?
yeah, I mean, I think what personally, I'll jump in. Sorry, Paula, if I'm like
Please.
just
No,
like
no, no, go.
I, from a talent point of view, and I partner with talent professionals in my own business. So I have something called the Career Redesign. It's a piece of software that I've built, and a large part of that is excavating your skills and capabilities. Now, and I structure it in it's called the honeycomb. So depending on where your capabilities sit, your honeycomb gets lit up. So you really understand what skills and capabilities you've had in your corporate career, because a lot of the times you can forget because you're just like, what do I do? So from a talent point of view, what I've worked with talent managers in the past who have really helped me build out like skills, capabilities, and understanding what organizations actually want from their talent. So if you're thinking about, potentially you might be thinking, okay, well, I could monetize my skill set and go and work with B2B, and that could be one income stream. But equally, you could start supporting like individuals and saying, listen, if you are looking at this flexible workforce and getting into organizations, you could potentially support individuals to help them understand skills, capabilities, and how they position themselves as talent. Yeah. Like that could be another offering. Hopefully that was the question, but that's what came to mind.
Yeah, I think that's great. What other questions did you get from your community, Jules?
Yeah, so interestingly, I think you spoke about it on your TikTok. So some of my community, I think were watching your videos, and I'm not sure if it was in us talking about it in some context, but it was about generalists. So I'm not sure if have you spoken about generalists on one of your videos? You have, right?
Uh-huh.
And so the question was around, Paula mentioned that you need to be specific when you're like launching your portfolio career, even if you're a generalist. And I know that you and I have spoken about this, but I'd really love to get your point of view on, I'm a generalist at heart, right? I describe myself as a generalist, polymath, whatever you want to refer to me as, but I have a very specific view of how I position myself. And I'd love to know what you think about how generalists can launch successful portfolio careers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I talked about that recently, and my video was sort of around, I recommend being more specific and specialized in your conversations when you're doing these curiosity chats, these discovery calls. And it's not to say that we can't be awesome and do a bunch of things fantastically, but my thought is this: when I'm going to someone and I think I'm being so helpful to say, I can help you with like all of these things. Oh yeah, I can do that. I can do that. Then they have to try to put the puzzle together of where does Paula fit, or why should I hire her, or where do I put her? And then they're sort of like, I don't know. So my suggestion is always just go out and be more targeted and be more specific in these conversations of, I can help you with this thing, or based on our conversation, I recommend this, and take some of that cognitive load off of them.
Yeah, 100%. I love that answer because it's really similar to the answer I would have given.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I was that person, like when I was first looking at leaving corporate, I've always held these roles where I've been the person that's been pulled out. I've never been like a functional lead of anything, right? I've been in corporate strategy, and then I've been head of the innovation lab and new ideas and launching startups that connect with corporate. So it's always been this quite broad role, right? I'm good at pulling in specialists, but personally, I'm like the dot connector. That's kind of how I would describe myself.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was having curiosity chats with my network and saying like, you know what I do, you know, what do you think? Like, how could you position me? What do you need? I can do anything. And honestly, for 8 months, I just got 0 bites. And yes, I am a slow learner because I should have been like pivoting my conversation sooner. But I thought, you guys know me. How can you not know where I fit within your organization? But like you said, I was putting all of the cognitive load onto them. People are busy. People wanted to recommend me. And I structure my network into payers, players, advocates, fans. Like I have this structure of of my network. And essentially I had a load of advocates that wanted to recommend me, but they didn't know what to say.
Mm-hmm.
So I became really specific when I'm talking to SMEs. This is how you pitch me. If you talk to larger corporates, here's generally where I fit. If you're talking to individuals who want mentorship, here's how I work with them. I'm not a coach. I'm more of a partner and a co-builder with them. And so I ended up creating this one pager that, depending on who I speak to in my network, I send that to them and say, hey, feel free to send this on to anyone. because I
Yes.
want to do the work for them. And that became really quite a successful strategy for me.
Yeah. That's so good. Yes, exactly. People are busy. They want to be helpful, but you need to make it so easy for them to be helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I've been in situations where I'm like, this woman is incredible, but I don't actually know what she does, but I just know that she's good at stuff. And I
Yes.
don't know how to pitch her. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think I was hopefully, I don't know if they said I was incorrect, they may have said she was good at stuff, but they didn't know where to pitch me. And so I'm like,
Mhm.
don't worry, I'll do the work for you.
Yeah, yeah. Totally. Totally. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question.
I had
Yeah,
another
so
question.
yeah,
Can
go.
I was
Go
really
for it.
interested, and we don't need to get specifics on actual like numbers, but I get a lot of questions around how long did it take you to replace your corporate salary?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of building on what we were talking about before, because I think one of the biggest fears in with my the women I work with is they've held pretty chunky senior roles, and they're
Right.
really scared of going like to zero, and they're like the pathway. I
Yeah.
have my own response, but I was interested in your experience.
Yeah. I was talking pretty openly about this stuff just because I think that transparency is so important, both when we think about like salary transparency back in our other full-time roles and now. Um, but let's see, I was in a fairly senior role when I left, so my salary was significant. So in
Yeah.
order to replace it, it took me about 18 months to fully replace my salary, and now I've doubled it in 3 years. So, that is just sort of a testament of, it does snowball and momentum builds. And the way that I've mostly done that is by long-term engagements, right? Of like getting in with a client and continuing to identify where I can be helpful and expanding, like the land and expand approach in sales. But what I will say is I really encourage people not to quit, just jump and quit their full-time jobs and stay where you have that paycheck coming in and see if you can start building while still in that role so that you're not going to zero and then starting from zero, you have, some bridge there.
100%. We're so aligned on that. I on my Substack I write about like don't quit your day job.
Yes.
Only because I mean, and sometimes it's untenable, right? And
Yeah.
so you have to think about like your mental health, etc. Sometimes it's forced upon you with layoffs. So I appreciate those contexts.
Yeah.
But what I encourage people is to start now if you're in a role, whether it's corporate or government or whatever. And I know that we have a government question that I want us to get to because I have government clients as well. And so for me, it was really similar, Paula. It was a hard months,
Yeah.
because I was understanding what exactly I was packaging and what I wanted to sell. And to be honest, I did not want to work in the same shape for the same similar clients when I left. Like I was done working in private
Yeah.
equity.
Yeah.
And so I could
Yeah.
have gone and slotted in as a fractional exec in private equity, but I'm like, I don't want to play there. So for me, it took me a little bit longer to get to a point where I was covering my salary because I was in
Mhm.
the C-suite, right? So I was earning, plus I was earning bonuses, etc. And so I would say now, like I officially quit in February 2024 and I started building my portfolio career in 2020. And now
Mhm.
we're in 2026, and I would say I've recovered my salary, but I would be lying if I said like I've like totally smashed the whole bonus and share
Yeah.
pool. Like that is like a goal over the next couple of years, but I'm like a million times happier.
Exactly. Exactly. And like you have to think about that as part of your compensation package, is your happiness, your freedom.
My freedom, like I work a lot less, and I'm not saying I work a 4 hour work week, by the way. Like I work hard, but
Yeah.
I'd be jumping on planes twice a week. Like it wasn't at all glamorous. I never saw my family, and so I don't have that. I don't have that anymore, and that's worth so much money to me.
Yeah, Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, let's answer that nonprofit government question because we are talking a lot about we're saying the word corporate over and over, and just would love to hear how you think about nonprofit and government background as well.
Yeah, and I particularly with nonprofit, so I have a few nonprofit clients actually, and I think you all have such incredible skill set that can be applied to a portfolio career because you are so limited by the amount of money you actually can spend. So you have to be really creative with how you're utilizing your resources. So that's the first thing I'll say. So I'll give you one example of a client that has been both in nonprofit and government in disaster recovery. She was the head of the COVID response here in Australia. And when she came to me, she's like, I don't do corporate. I don't know what to charge in corporate. Like I don't have these skills. But we went through this process I mentioned earlier. I call it like career archaeology. So we dug back into each of her roles and her projects and really distilled her skill set. So even though you're in nonprofit, you're doing internal selling, right? So you're doing sales, but you're selling ideas internally. Stakeholder management, you are managing budget, you're working with teams, you're actually doing exactly what we do in corporate, but in corporate and private institutions, you just happen to get paid more, right? Because of the structure of the organization. But in my experience, nonprofit, you guys are incredible at actually pitching for work and getting shit done because that's the way you move through things. And in government, sure, you might not have experience where you've moved at pace because government is traditionally slower. However, your ability to understand pain points and work with stakeholders and again, move things forward, in my experience, supersedes what I've seen in corporate. So my guidance there is like, let's take off the hat of the industry and let's look at the functional skills and capabilities. Let's look at how you actually went about doing your work and distilling those skills and saying, okay, well, how might then I apply this in a different context, whether that's a direct to consumer, so you're working with individuals or working with small businesses.
Yep. Yep. I echo everything you say. And I often suggest to people, let go of your industry experience, focus on, like you said, the functional. And also, again, this just comes back to what are the business problems you solve? And nonprofits are businesses, government agencies are businesses. We all have the same problems, even if we talk about them a little differently.
Yeah, and I don't know if you see this, but I do see, and I was like this too, actually. I really, becoming a portfolio careerist, I had to step away from the brand of the organization. So I never said, oh, hi, I'm Jules Fidel. Like I would say like, I'm Jules Fidel. I'm the head of this. I work for this. Like that's how I introduced myself. Yeah. So I was really stuck in this context of where I worked and that was my value. And when you step out of that and you just let it go as a portfolio careerist, then it's really like, okay, I'm in front of the mirror, in front of these, who am I? Yes. And what do I actually do? And sometimes that takes a little bit of iteration to really figure that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. I know we're a couple minutes over. Any last questions you wanted to quickly cover, Jules, that you thought are important?
Just one more, which I would love to get your insight on. This question came up 3 times. How do I explain what I do when I don't have a job title anymore?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally. It's a good question. Exactly like you just said, how you introduce yourself as, I'm Paula, I'm the director of blah, blah, blah. So, when I'm chatting with, and when I'm moving through a discovery phase, which is how I think about the sales process as a consultant, again, it's a lot of curiosity chats, like you're saying, and I'm not salesy, I'm not pitching, but I will just give sort of, more of a hi, I'm Paula and I'm a business operations consultant. So what that means is, and I'll oftentimes kind of give a story with it, like some anecdotal evidence of like, so what that means is I help companies do XYZ or achieve XYZ thing, because it is, I need to do that translation because I'm talking to people who are still in that corporate capacity.
Yes.
And so they're still thinking about where would you be in my org chart? So I'll often like think of me as a head of business operations doing these things.
Oh my
How about
gosh,
you?
so similar, Paula. So really quickly, I always think about a couple of things when I'm speaking to someone. I want to help them. I call it sameness. So how can
Mhm.
I help them place me in their world so I'm the same as, really similar to what you do in the corporate
Yeah.
context. So the
Yeah.
first thing I do is, and also I want to do that so they feel that, the anxiety reduces. Because although we think it's just a chat, people are like, what is this going to be? Like, I want to provide also people relief. So that's a kind of
Mm.
two things I think about as soon as I get on a call is like, how can I help this person feel relief that they're speaking to someone like me? And how do I get them to place me so they don't have to do a cognitive positioning of who I am?
Yeah.
So that's the first two things I think of. And I guess at the beginning, I work with large corporates, SMEs and individuals. So
Mhm.
I had three like mini scripts of how I pitch myself in their world. And so people
Mm-hmm.
really, when it was a large corporate, I would use the language of a large corporate. So I would help them place me. I would credentialize myself. I'd give them an example and then I'd empathize with where they're at. And that would be the same thing I would follow, but I would just change my tone depending on who I speak to.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. That's really good. Really good stuff.
Um,
Awesome.
I love this. Hopefully we can do it again. If your
Yeah.
audience enjoyed it, I would love to, yeah, I'd love to do this again.
Oh my gosh, this was so fun. Yeah, this was for anyone who joined us, this is both of our first lives. So this was great. Good questions in the chat. And yeah, let's definitely do it again, maybe even as soon as next week or something.
Yeah, I'd love that. And any other questions, like keep them coming and we will answer them for you.
Yeah, we're slide into our DMs.
Yeah.
I'm always there. Check out our videos and comment. And I think we're both really responsive to comments to try to just be as helpful as possible. So yeah, thanks, Jules. It was fun to do this, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.